My name's Linda, and I'm very proud to be affiliated with the Pima Council on Aging. My career has involved a lot around working in aging settings and healthcare, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Visibility Matters through PCOA is about training social service and healthcare providers to better understand the needs of LGBTQ older adults. We want to make it so conditions are better and compassion is there and information is there to best serve people. I'm hoping that in the training that you receive through Visibility Matters that your awareness increases. If we just look back at the last 100 years, we'll say, there's been so much discrimination. Folks learn to really hide their identity and not to tell others. And that's part of a good coping strategy, but also it's how the word never got out that this whole group is here.
Growing up in the 50s, being homosexual was just illegal, and it was considered mentally ill and, not something you wanted to identify with. At that time, I was in Chicago. The police were arresting people who were in gay bars and putting their names in the paper. You could be arrested for wearing a pantsuit. I just kept thinking about suicide as like, I'm the only person who feels this way. I think I was in my 30s before I ever even met someone who identified as a lesbian. And I knew it wasn't something you wanted anybody to know about.
My brother said I was skipping with my girlfriend, and we were about, 5 or 6 years old, and he kind of moved our hands and said, you can't hold her hand anymore. You need to hold a boy's hand. And I remember being shocked and thinking, okay, is that right? Well, I'm just not going to do it in front of you. I'm gonna just do this in private.
At a very young age, I actually struggled understanding my gender because I was like a little girl. I always only played with dolls and played house. That was just my whole life. As I got a little older, I kind of realized, oh, I'm in a boy's body. I'm a boy. Okay, that's weird, but whatever, I'll deal with that, right? So I've had sort of a self-awareness for a very long time that I saw the world through a very different lens than many people, and I had to learn that my lens was okay.
Many of us have lived two lives. I was 43 when I transitioned. Before I came out, I was constantly depressed, and there was a time when I woke up one morning and said, why am I getting up? And since I started my transition, I have been much more comfortable with who I am, but the gender identity piece may have torn me apart.
My name's J. Kyle Peterson. I was born intersex. Intersex is a term that describes a wide range of sex characteristics of a human being that are inborn, that are just not like clearly male or female in a classical sense. Somebody decided to name me a girl and raise me a girl, even though it was obvious that my anatomy leaned more to the male. When I became aware I was a boy, I went to professionals because I was feeling suicidal.
My name is Deanna Lewis. I came out when I was 17. I was 56 or 57 when I came out as non-binary. When we look at my intersections of being a cisgender female that is also non-binary, that is a person of color, that is a veteran, that has PTSD, that has seen things in 20 years as a firefighter paramedic that people shouldn't see, those things begin to take a toll.
I am an individual who never became HIV infected, so I've lived, but I lost all of my friends. All of my friends died. So it's changed my whole life over the years because people who would have probably been my long-term friends, we never got that chance. So I've had to really learn how to navigate this space as I've gotten older. I have mostly been single all my life. Even within other Black folks, I run against so much hatred from other Black people because of the way I am in the world or the way I think or that I'm just highly educated, you know what I mean? I've been so privileged, and the list goes on. We don't know how to, as people, to just respect and love each other.
At work, they were not noticed. right? All those kind of social connections that help you get promoted. That didn't happen. That then influences finances, retirement savings, housing is very difficult. They're not going to be telling their families. If they do tell their families, they often were disowned.
I came out to my sister in the 70s, and she really was very rejecting and very hurt, and really we didn't have much communication for decades. So many of our community don't have the economic resources or extended family support that heterosexual people do have.
The doctors in 1981, they said, "Oh, you knew you were a boy, but you were raised a girl. Tick, transsexual." That was the term in that time in history. So I went along and had that wrong diagnosis, and it blew up my family. I have no relatives, it had nothing to do with me. My parents died, never accepted me. I didn't get properly diagnosed with the right label till 2001. I was 49 years old.
It wasn't until I was 62 that I revealed to my friends and my family that I was gay. Some of my friends asked me not to contact them anymore. One person told me, "Well, you're a friend, but you're going to go to hell."
We were afraid to come out. We were afraid what kind of reception we would have. We don't talk about a lot, but people who find church communities who've been kicked out, that's our spirituality. I've had a couple of experiences where I came out in a church, and I did leave that church. I didn't feel welcome there.
There was conversion therapy for a long time. We're going to change who you are. That was often, again, by an institution that was supposed to help. So religion, churches, spirituality, synagogues, mosques. These are places that many people turn to for help. And for the LGBTQ community, often those were places of harm.
I didn't come out till I was in my 30s. I came out and I loved it. I loved the culture. I worked in healthcare since the 70s, so standing up and protecting people's rights, I think was a big part of where I stood in hospitals.
During the 60s and 70s, when we were young adults and moving into adulthood, there were all of these movements that were very empowering and freeing, and caused a lot of us to become less fearful. We could see we could change things, and we did change things.
It was like a wonder to me. It's like, look at what these women can do, and it helped me to see that I could be part of making a change in the world. I seem to take very well to resistance.
We have different roles we play at different times. As a parent, as a friend, as a sibling, as an employee, as an employer. All those things identify who we are and make us unique. I went into the military because my family has a long history of military service. I would have stayed in for 30, 35 years if they let me, but they found out I was dealing with gender identity back in 1990, and I was asked to resign. Don't Ask, Don't Tell didn't apply to transgender people. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was based on sexual orientation. Gender identity was considered a mental illness. I can't change who I am. I'm not going to. A lot of my peers have plans for how they can go back in the closet if they need to.
If you think about all of the hard work that we have to do in order to survive and even get close to thriving, why should we be doing all this hard work?
I think people often forget that our mental health and well-being affects our physical well-being. And when we look at structural oppression, not having all gender restrooms, that can result in physical manifestations of harm just from that sign that just says, oh, men or woman, because it perpetuates that message that you're not welcome, that you're not valid, that you don't exist.
We always want to think about visibility on many different realms. We want to have different images out there. What's on your website? What's in your waiting room?
What's in your library? What kind of pictures do you have on the wall? How do you let people know they belong?
One of the things we know about messaging is if you have a good experience, you'll tell 3 people. If you have a bad experience, you'll tell 11 people. If that message gets out, this place isn't welcoming, which further perpetuates and increases the divide in disparities in healthcare. What are those root causes? And they're systemic often.
Even if we're queer, we have grown up thinking that's not okay. A lot of people from the older generation have had to be defended and have had to be a certain way. Even if you're in a safe place, it's hard to feel that way, and it's hard to completely be yourself, because always in the back of your mind, there's those messages that it's not okay or that you're different.
In every environment that we're in, every service that we access, we have to weigh whether it's safe or not.
I don't feel safe out there. I got to think about, I got to go to the restroom before I leave the house. Where am I going to shop? Where am I going to do, does it have a public restroom? Does it have a stall? Then I got to pay attention to who's in there.
If I have to go to a facility, I would like to be around some other LGBTQ plus people.
I do believe that I will have to rely on the system, and that I have to have faith that the people that are in the system are good people. You want to make sure, certainly if you're trans or queer, that you have, that they respect your partner and that your partner can be there with you and doesn't feel funny, and that when they ask you questions, they're not all the heteronormative questions that you get.
I'm very concerned about, if I'm 80, 90, if I make it that long, 80 or 90 years old, living by myself in my big house, needing to go into a care facility, how am I going to do that? In my experience of going into them, they're extremely heteronormative. How do you shop around for a care facility, and find one that's going to be open to who you are as an individual? Because I'm not going to curtail who I am.
How would a hetero couple feel if they went to this nursing home and they said, prove you're married? And after you prove you're married, we're going to limit the amount of time that you have with this person. That just wouldn't be acceptable. One of the things I was afraid, if I have a stroke or if I have something where I'm debilitated, what would my brother do, or would my sisters, who are not quite as loving and accepting, what would they do?
I try very hard to tell people that advanced medical directives, advanced care planning is not just for old people.
In a way, it makes me feel more in charge to know that I have a trust, that I have a power of attorney, that I have decided what my wishes are.
Getting advanced directives together and getting them in order is essential. Whether you're in a partnership, relationship, spouse, whatever, no matter what, you need to have those advanced directives.
I know things have changed a little bit now with the ability to be married. I think it's really changed, but I did have one situation in the hospital. This was in the 90s, so there was no legal marriage. We had a patient who had dementia, and she had been with this woman for 50 years. I mean, they have been together since they were in college, and her family disowned her, both of their families. They had powers of attorneys, and she wanted to go on hospice. She did not want anything that was going to prolong her life at that stage. And the hospital administration did not recognize the power of attorney. And they were insistent to find a relative. And she had a brother, and the brother was found. And he didn't recognize the partner, and he changed the course of the person's end of life. So my biggest advice is that you have paperwork and that it's legal, and not just that you think it is, or not that you've had this conversation, or not that you think you have a common law marriage, because you don't unless it's legal. And a family member will be found that may make a decision that you don't like.
My partner and I were together for over a quarter of a century, plus some years, and she ended up with lymphoma, and was in the hospital, and I slept there a lot when she was there in ICU. It was very difficult for me because even though I was her medical power of attorney, they would go to her brother. There was a woman nurse that would come in, and she kept saying to me, I know who you are because your life is the same as mine, but if anything was to happen to your partner right now, I would not be able to tell you. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I have no documents that you're the one I could talk to. And I said, no, we've given them, the medical power of attorney. And she says, well, it's not here. And for some reason or another, it kept getting misplaced. And it wasn't on that top page, often I couldn't come in because you had to ring the bell and you had to, say, they have to give you permission to come in. Saying I was her partner didn't work. Saying I was her sister sometimes worked, or family, but she'd tell me come on in, and I'd have to say I was her sister, not her partner. And often they said no. They said, oh, she's sleeping right now. I said, no, she's not sleeping. They said, we just looked in there, she's sleeping. I said, she might have her eyes closed, but we just spoke. And, she said to come in. And there was times they didn't allow me to. And I would have to sleep in the waiting room and wait until it was free for me to come in. Usually it was not during the night when she wanted me the most, and so that was very, very difficult to have that. And I think having those papers is really important. So I would say, have your paperwork in order, and then know your laws, know the rules, know what's happening now. Hopefully that there's no tolerance for that kind of stuff now.
People will kill themselves to keep their loved ones at home when they can't take care of them. They start realizing that they're not who they were, and or their loved ones realize that. They isolate themselves. That isolation, not only for the individual, but for their caregiver, can really cause a lot of serious health and mental health issues.
Some people like more alone time. They have certain special people, and it's the quality, not the quantity of relationships. But someone who doesn't feel they can call someone or go see someone, that is very harmful. And there's different research out there about how does that harm. It harms with health. It harms because do I matter, right? Just that kind of core thing is I can't talk to anyone.
The 3 ills of aging are boredom, worthlessness, and isolation. I think it's really, really important that you have people that check on you, that care about you. There's so many people that are living by themselves that think they're doing the right thing because they're guarding their independence. But if they would allow themselves to have a little dependence, the quality in their life would really improve.
Navigating being older and part of the queer community is a very interesting aspect because there's actually a bunch of us out there like me. Wouldn't it be incredible if there were a place where we could come together, all of us, and just have time with each other and meet new people that we may know. So that's been probably the hardest part of this whole process of aging. It gets lonely at times.
See, intersex is not lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, question, or any of those, right? So I feel lonely even within the LGBTQ senior community. I need a friend. I need a friend.
Many of us are alone. Some of us, fortunately, I am not one, have lost their partners and really have no one to fall back on.
Communities, long-term communities, whether it's independent living, assisted living, memory units, nursing homes, all of that really need to have a culture change. And the culture change is about belonging, wanting everybody to belong. And in order for that to happen, all cultures need to thrive.
How do we support people? And I think kindness, compassion, and empathy are top three, right? And embedded in there is respect.
We want people to be educated. We want people to be kind. We want people to not say one thing to our face and then say something else behind our backs. We want to belong.
The community itself is evolving to be more and more inclusive, and that's its own issue within the LGBTQ community. Is the community really supporting everyone? Some things have really improved, and then some things are worse than ever. As awareness and acceptance increases, pushback increases. In our current climate, I think especially for trans folks, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of hatred. And people are murdered. I mean, we need to just put it out there. It is not just harmful. It can be the end of someone's life.
I see us as stronger, but I don't see we're anywhere close to achieving safety. The safety of not being harassed, the safety of not being excluded, from society.
Depending on how rabid the opposition gets, it may get worse and worse before it has a chance to get better. It is vital, especially currently, for people to understand that as a transgender person, I'm first of all a person. I said I identify as non-binary trans femme, but actually I identify as a person who likes to go outdoors, a former Boy Scout and a current volunteer in the Boy Scouts, a former Army officer, a community activist, a person who wants to change things, who is non-binary and trans femme.
The world is so much richer if those are the things that we focused on about who is this person really, rather than a caricature of who we think the person is.
I really do have hope for the future, at least in some areas, because people are so gender fluid now and so open about what they want.
Although I've laid out a lot of the challenges that LGBTQ older adults have for decades from many dimensions in their lives, there's also a lot of resilience. Our image of aging, especially in America, is really dated. It's about the good stuff happens when you're young, and then after that, nothing really happens. Well, I'm here to tell you a lot happens. Aging is the longest and biggest developmental stage. Teenage, right, we think like 12 to 19. We think infancy, 0 to 2, toddler. So these are like stages of development that go on a couple years. This is 5+ decades. Someone who's 55 is probably going to be talking about this very different than 75 versus 95. I also want you to go easy on yourself. You're not going to understand everything after one training. So if it's whet your appetite, good. We're all learning together.